Week 2 in the Big Ten kicks off tomorrow night with Illinois, Kansas. What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our Big Ten channel. You know, week 1, we had 3 conference games and some really good games in the Big Ten, or with Big Ten teams. And then you go to week 2, and it's a pretty boring slate, honestly. Not a lot of big games, no conference games. I don't understand why you'd have 3 conference games week 1 and then 0 in week 2. But let's get to it. We'll start with Indiana State, Indiana. So actually another Friday night game. Big Ten Network, Indiana coming off that loss to Ohio State. What I'll be watching for here is to see how good this Indiana defense actually is. And maybe they're just really good, and maybe Ohio State's not going to have problems offensively. That's something to watch here. Could be interesting, but no reason to expect them to lose to Indiana State. Illinois, Kansas is going to be a sneaky good game here this weekend, 7:30 Eastern Time. Game will be on ESPN2. Kansas is favored by 3 points. Kansas, a little bit of a slow start last week, but then they got it together in the second half. But Jalen Daniels did not play in that game. He's expected to play this week, so that'll give Kansas a big boost offensively. Although Jason Bean, he's played a lot of football and is a pretty good quarterback himself. But Kansas playing at home, a veteran team. It'll be that spread attack versus the power game of Illinois. Was a little bit concerned about Illinois' defense last week. I thought it would be better than it was. And because of that, I think they could have a hard time in this one. How good is Kansas' defense? That'll be interesting to see. I think Illinois is going to want to run the football, play that power game, try to keep this as low scoring as possible. Kansas probably going to try to turn it into a shootout. The over-under there at 58.5. Pretty high number. And again, I think that has a lot to do with Illinois' defense not being as good as we thought, at least last week. We go to the Saturday games, Purdue versus Virginia Tech. This one will be on ESPN2 at noon Eastern Time. Virginia Tech favored by 3, probably because they're at home, honestly. I think these teams are pretty even. Virginia Tech did get a big win last week over Old Dominion. You can say, well, it's Old Dominion, but they've lost to them in the past. So I think this team has gotten better. Purdue with a lot of question marks. Didn't look great last week, but they played a pretty good Fresno State team. And so I think this one could go either way. Should be a good one. Moving on to Nebraska, Colorado. Noon Eastern Time on Fox. It's the big noon game. Colorado's favored by 3.5 points. You know, I'll be watching to see how they come out. I mean, are they going to be still on a high from last week celebrating that win over TCU, or they come out focused? Nebraska, man, another devastating loss. How are they going to feel? Is it here we go again, or are they going to bounce back and come out focused and ready to go? Definitely, psychologically, probably the most interesting game of the weekend, seeing how these two teams, you know, again, Nebraska coming back off of just a heartbreaking loss, and Colorado coming off of just a monumental win. I don't know how it's going to play out, but this one should be a really fun one to watch. One of the best games of the day. Moving on to Youngstown State at Ohio State. Big Ten Network, noon Eastern Time. Buckeyes would look to get their offense going against an FCS opponent. Penn State faces Delaware, noon Eastern Time on Peacock. No reason to expect this game to be close either. Next up, we've got Iowa State, 3:30 Eastern Time on Fox. Iowa's favored by 4. Iowa State, you know, they've got some players out with those issues they've had, but their defense looked really good last week. And I know it's against an FCS team, but still, they looked really good on that side of the ball. And we know about Iowa's defense, and they're still trying to figure out their offense. So you could say, take the under. But look what the over-under is on this game. 36.5. So Vegas sees it. They see this being a very low-scoring game. I agree with that. And, you know, which defense is better? Which one will win the day? Or maybe which offense can actually do just a little bit. I have no idea. This is going to be a very low-scoring game, more than likely. Iowa, I feel like, is the better team, but it is a rivalry. It is on the road for them. Iowa State won last year. It's a hard one to predict. We'll see what happens in this matchup. Next up, we've got UNLV at Michigan, 3:30 Eastern Time. Michigan's favored by 36.5 points. This game will actually be on CBS. Yes, this game will be on CBS. That just seems really weird. UNLV, Michigan, CBS, 3:30 Eastern Time. But that's what we've got. Michigan, we'll see if they can get the run game going a little bit better. See if they can maybe get some of those big long runs that they didn't get so much of in week 1. It's what we're used to seeing, so I'll be watching that. But obviously a game where they should win easily. Then we've got Richmond at Michigan State. 3:30 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network. Michigan State looks to move to 2-0 and just kind of get some chemistry going offensively. We'll see how that plays out. UTEP at Northwestern, 3:30 Eastern time on the Big Ten Network as well. So I guess that'll one of them will be the alternate broadcast. But UTEP is favored by 1.5 points. UTEP is favored on the road at Northwestern. That tells you what Vegas thinks about Northwestern. I expect a low-scoring game. You see another very low over/under there at 38.5. And we'll see if Northwestern can bounce back and get a win. How about Charlotte and Maryland? 7:30 Eastern time on NBC. Maryland favored by 24.5 points in this game. So we've got Maryland and Charlotte on NBC, and we've got UNLV and Michigan on CBS. Two nationally televised games that should be blowouts, which is interesting. And I think that does tell the story of Week 2 in the Big Ten. It's just a terrible slate of games. And it's crazy because this weekend is one of the best weekends in terms of games across all of college football. The Big Ten just didn't get in on it for whatever reason. And this makes me kind of sad because you see an NBC game, you see a CBS game. When I was a kid, I didn't have cable, so all I could watch was the games that were on ABC. I could watch the 3:30 Eastern time CBS game, and then we had back in the day Jefferson Pilot or Lincoln Financial, whatever, that showed an SEC game at noon Eastern time. And so when I was at home, I didn't really have a chance to watch a lot of these games when I was a kid. And now you're seeing Charlotte and Maryland on NBC, UNLV and Michigan on CBS. Very interesting, very interesting. It's going to be a different world next year with all these games moving to NBC and CBS out of the Big Ten. But let's move on now to Temple Rutgers, 7:30 Eastern time. Both teams 1-0. Rutgers favored by 8.5 points. This one will be on the Big Ten Network. Temple is coming off of a win over Akron in a very close game, 24-21. Rutgers, you feel pretty good about their chances in this game. Then we've got Eastern Michigan versus Minnesota, 7:30 Eastern time. This one's also on the Big Ten Network. Minnesota favored by 20.5 points. Seems like a pretty big number considering how close their game was against Nebraska and how bad their offense looked. Eastern Michigan's coming off of a 33-23 win over Howard, so this is not exactly a great team, but still, are we going to expect that Minnesota offense to get going here? We'll see. They, again, did not look great against Nebraska, or maybe Nebraska's defense is just that good. Wisconsin, Washington State. This was at 7:30 Eastern time on ABC, primetime game. Wisconsin favored by 6, looking for some payback on Washington State, who beat them in Madison last year. This is going to be a great game. Wisconsin's still trying to kind of get some things figured out. I feel like Washington State is a team that looks pretty good this year. I think they're definitely an under-the-radar team. So I think this will be a really good game. And so that's it. That's the schedule for Week 2. Some pretty good games with Wisconsin, Washington State, Colorado, Nebraska. But overall, definitely an underwhelming schedule. We'll see what we can learn from these teams here after Week 2. But we'll have predictions coming up tomorrow. Stay tuned for that. Please help us out and subscribe if you're a Big Ten fan. Trying to get this channel to 1,000 subscribers. So if you want to see more content, please help us out and subscribe. Give us your thoughts on Week 2 down in the comments below.